This is Nikki Naab-Levy, and you are listening to Results Not Typical, a podcast that challenges the traditional narrative of Pilates and fitness while tackling misinformation that is keeping you from reaching your fitness goals. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Results Not Typical. Today, I've got Cora Geroux with me, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the realities of running your own business. If you are a movement teacher or a small business owner, Cora's background is, I'll let her say it for herself, but she's a yoga teacher as well as a business coach for a yoga teacher. And we're also going to sort of talk about, I think this is a good topic as we kind of get near that end of the year feeling of like, it's really hard. It's really hard to step away from the hustle culture, even if you teach like quote unquote mindful movement. So I think we're going to be all over the map, to be honest, but, welcome, Cora, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Nikki. It's so exciting. I think you made a guest appearance on my podcast a couple of months ago, and we've been, collaborating a little bit since then. And it's always fun just to connect with someone who is doing something similar and just to hash out, some of the challenges and the struggles that we go through. Because for the most part, whether you are a movement teacher or you are a business owner, or maybe you're the combination of the two, it's kind of a solo gig, right? So it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's it though, isn't it? It's like, it can feel really lonely. And a lot of the time it can feel like you're just doing everything wrong. And you're like, I don't know what's happening. Why did I decide to go into business? I'm not an adult. I don't know how to balance a checkbook. What is this tax form? And why are people looking at me like I know what's going on?
Yeah, man. Why am I who gave me permission to be an adult? I wonder what milestone you go through that enables you to feel like an adult. Like, I don't have kids. Maybe that is one. But then I look at some of my friends who are parents. I'm like, you're definitely not an adult. How are you responsible for that child? So I don't know what it is, but yeah.
Let me tell you, I got to say, I cannot possibly believe that is the litmus test. I right now, I underwent, IVF like 6-7 months ago. And of course there's like a backlog in surrogates in COVID times. We're going to be all over the place apparently today in this podcast.
That's cool.
But like at some point in theory, there may be a tiny baby in my life. And my latest narrative for the end of the year is I wake up, look at my husband and go, are you sure I should parent? This just feels like a bad choice. I don't think I'm enough of an adult. What if they learn to read and they find my Instagram? Like, I'm just not sure about this.
Well, that's, to be honest, I'm 36. And that is one of the reasons why I do not have children, is that I do not know if I should be a parent. Should I be a parent? I make questionable decisions. It's like, I don't know. But I think the more I know people who've had kids, I'm like, they don't have their shit together any more than I do. For some reason, they've just pulled the pin and it's happened. Right. So.
Yeah, I'm 36 too. And
cool.
I always thought at some point I would feel like an adult. And I've come to realize that is very untrue. and I think the irony in this is we like have this conversation is that people pay us for business advice.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is that you would pay someone for parenting advice if they, had kids of their own and their kids were doing okay. They were mostly sane and functional human beings. So it's kind of the same thing. Is maybe you and I didn't have the answers going in. I know that when I became a yoga teacher, like 12 or 13 years ago, whenever that was, I specifically did not want to have my own business. Like that was not because I thought that's not my skill set. It's not my strength. It's not where I don't have a natural proclivity to do businessy type stuff. But because you and I have just ended up doing that, and that has been our path, sometimes I think not having a natural sense of ability in an area actually makes you a better teacher at it. Like, you think about it with movement. I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. The shit that was really hard for you. I'm sorry. I assumed I can swear on your podcast.
You can swear on this podcast. Yes.
Cool.
I'm a walking curse word.
Yes. The shit that's really hard for you, if you stick at it and really learn about it, you can teach that so much better than the stuff that came so naturally and easily to you. It's harder to teach it because you didn't have to do all the troubleshooting and the figuring out and the resistance and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a lot of truth to that, where it's like, if it didn't come naturally to you, but you managed to do it successfully and replicate it for yourself and replicate it for other people, right? That's what teaching is, whether you're teaching movement or you're teaching business. And also, I think that if it did not come naturally to you, I think it makes it easier to have empathy for people who come to you and they're like, I'm really struggling. And you're like, yeah, you are. This is hard. and I think I feel like that's something that I wish more people were transparent about, beyond like the memeable Instagram thing, right? Where it's like, there's no guarantee in this stuff. Like it is really hard. You know what I mean? And I think one of the themes I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it comes up with the teachers who I talk to in my coaching group and in consulting, and I certainly struggle with it, is it's like, when it's your business, it's so hard to create boundaries around when to take time off, because it's in your phone, it's in your laptop. If you don't take, right, like we're just always like, there's always something to do. And there's this feeling of, if I don't do it, then it's like, you just like watch like money grow little wings and fly away from you or something. I mean, do you struggle with that? Because that is so hard for me.
Oh my goodness. Yes. And the boundaries thing with time, it is something I have gotten a lot better at, because not having it caused really significant problems. So there was a huge motivation to figure it out and to maintain those boundaries. So when I realized I had a business as a yoga teacher, it was probably 2 or 3 years after I started teaching full time. And then in that moment, when I realized I had a business and I started learning about business stuff, that's when I really struggled from that point on with boundaries, right? Because it was no longer, I'm done teaching class and then I go home until my next class. There was all the stuff that needed to happen in between to build a business. And so I didn't have any boundaries around that for, probably like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And ended up owning a couple of studios and doing all of that stuff in there. But because I didn't have those boundaries, I had 2 really severe periods of burnout where I literally couldn't get out of bed. And like, if I did the laundry, that would be like a momentous day that I accomplished something. And that's not good for business either, because my business had to essentially shut down. So that didn't work. So now I have pretty tight boundaries. I don't work like all of what I'm going to say is like 90% of the time. So if you like catch me on Instagram at 9 p.m. at night, once it does happen, but like I don't work in the evenings and I don't work on Sundays in my business. Quite often I will work on a Saturday. I'm not going to lie about that. It's just shit spills over from the week that I haven't gotten done. So that's just how it is. And I also don't go on social media or anything that's related to my business in those off hours. And I don't even listen to business related stuff or read business books or any of that stuff, because it will keep my mind active. And I really try and like switch off and watch like home improvement videos or something on YouTube during that time. It has nothing to do with my actual business.
That's very yogic of you.
Well, it was only because literally like not getting out of bed for several months at a time, it was like, I don't have another choice. I know that my tendency, which I think for a lot of people, is to push, do all the things, see all the money that you're leaving on the table. And it does have impacts on my business, right? So, in the old way of how I used to operate, it was like lots of stuff happens, lots of growth, lots of workshops, lots of marketing, and then I would crash, right? And then now I don't do as much. So if I'm thinking about sustainability and not burning out, I can't accomplish this is what I really want people to hear, because it's like, I think everyone wants to know, like, how can I accomplish all the things that I want to accomplish and take time off and do all the things and do all the stuff? And it just is spread out over longer time. So it's like, I have to say yes to less things, which means my business will grow more slowly, but I won't have the steep growth and then in bed for 2 months and then, that sort of thing. It's more of a curve rather than that steep growth line. So maybe it's yogic of me, but I only learned from necessity of being like totally out of action by not doing that.
Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, it's interesting. It's like, I am so much better than I used to be, but it's still like not great. Like, right. Like even this week, like I was basically like earlier today, like a Debbie Downer sketch. It was just, I was in such a bad mood that at the end of the conversation with my friends, I was like, and feline AIDS. Like it was just utterly ridiculous. And it was that moment that I was like, oh, this is someone else can be like, you're burnout. But like for me, because like my ability to push to the point of like full, like deep, can't get out of bed burnout is like so extreme. I'm like, oh, this is pre-burnout. I'm like, this is the pre-burnout. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Because the thing is lately I move a lot slower than I used to. Like, I feel like actually nothing happens and I'm just choosing to be okay with things being slower than they used to be because I'm happier when I don't do as much and I'm a lot less stressed out and I feel better. But I'm like, great. I need to look at my calendar. And at some point between now and the end of the year, I am taking 7 days off.
Yeah.
Like I'm taking 7 days off and that's it. And whatever doesn't, in the 7 days before I take the 7 days off, I will schedule the emails. Like I will maybe check the inbox once a day, but like, I'm like, no, like I have to carve out this time. And at the end of the day, it's only 7 days, but I also can't remember the last time I took any block of time off, which means like it's well overdue. And so I think it's okay to like be a little reactive to having not planned a break also.
Well, yeah. And I think however you get that time off, the important part is that it happens, right? So I'm someone who doesn't do things unless they're planned. Like that's like, is it Newton's law? An object in motion will stay in motion. That's what I tend to do. My partner has a normal job, which means he gets like public holidays off and like those things. And I've never worked really a normal job. I have for very short stints of time and then got fired. But then, I'm not used to taking those sorts of days off. So if I don't have them scheduled, I don't take them off. And to be honest, I do not schedule myself public holidays off. But what I do, and I've been doing this since last year, and it's like I had really good intentions for it. And I think it's still serving a purpose, even though it's not exactly what I had intended. But I take 1 week off every quarter. And I do it around the solstice because I'm actually a massive and equinox's secret hippie that I just don't tell anyone about. But like my personal life, I'm like, doing some weird moon ritual or something. So I have that. So like December 21st, I have that week off. It also just happens to be Christmas, which is great. But so nothing is scheduled in my calendar. It's all blocked off. It's all done in advance. And my original intention was to not work at all. I will be honest, that never happens. But what does happen is I do all of my like creative work and planning and strategy and deep thinking about the business rather than doing anything like sending out emails or whatever, or having meetings or doing podcast interviews or filming content, because none of that has been scheduled in that week. So it ends up being like once a quarter, I get to really think about my business. And that has been helpful for me to try and like slow down and strategize a little bit and have that breathing space, even though it's not like I'm not on the beach hanging out, doing whatever you would do in a holiday. It's still been helpful. So I think regardless of how you get the time off, whether it's scheduled in advance, because if I don't do it, I would work up until Christmas Eve and then start again the next day and just be like, oh shit, I didn't plan that. So I just ended up working. But if you can also be like, oh, I need to take this time off and schedule it in, I think that works too.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something really smart about doing that. And I mean, I think I'm probably going to start thinking about that moving forward. But as someone who has been sort of coming out of a cycle of burnout for probably the past year, to be honest, like the first thing for me was like like there was so much on my plate that I had to just start clearing things off my plate. And then I was less tired, but I still haven't had enough brain space to like think so far in advance as to take a week off, if that makes sense. And I think that's actually really normal. And I think we kind of need to normalize like this unintentional digging ourselves into a hole, because no one does that on purpose. But it's like, when you are in charge of all the things, there's just, and you're working alone, there's not a lot of great sounding boards. There's not a lot of parameters. It just can kind of start to consume your life.
Well, no one's managing you and no one's looking out for you, right? This is what I always try to think about. If you have a business and you imagine all the roles in a normal, I was going to say a real business, but like a normal business with loads of people involved, everyone has a role, and there's a reason why those people have roles. There's a reason why you have a manager and why you have a CEO and why you have all these different people doing these different things. And one of the things that we miss out on, if you are a sole trader, whatever, solopreneur, independent business owner, is that no one is looking at your schedule but you and saying, hey, Nikki, you haven't had a week off or a weekend off at all in the last 6 months. Let's try and proactively put some downtime in there for you. Because, if someone else was looking at your schedule or your calendar and trying to make sure that you didn't burn out or didn't, crash or lose your creativity or whatever, if you had a great manager, they would be looking out for you and scheduling that in and thinking it through for you. And you would just be like, oh yeah, right. I didn't see that. Because you're in it. It's so hard to see it. So that's one of the things that I try and do is like, what would I do if I was a staff member looking at my schedule? Would that have any red flags? Like, would it be like, wow, this person, like the longest time ever, I'm an early riser. So I would just start work early. And so I would start around 5:30 in the morning. And the intention was always to start when I was like alert and awake, 5:30 in the morning, but then to finish around 3. That was my intention because my productivity goes down a lot at that time. But my partner always works until like 6. So I ended up working from 5:30 until a.m. until 6 p.m. And if I was looking out for myself and being a good manager, it's like, okay, well, you either need to get stricter with clocking off at 3, or you need to start working later in the day, But I think we have to do that for ourselves. As a business owner, you have to be your own manager and look out for yourself like you were someone independent that you wouldn't put through that if they were working in your business.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is like, if have you had even like functional managers modeled to you? Because I think what's interesting for me is like from childhood on, right? Like my parents have never modeled any good boundaries around work, and we'll just leave it at that. And we'll set my childhood trauma aside for a moment, because I try not to get too deep into that on podcasts, but it exists, right? That was not modeled to me. And then I went and I did college, and that nothing good was modeled to me there, because I crammed 2 degrees into 4 years, which says a lot about my own psychosis. And then like I went and I worked for studios and gyms, and studios and gyms will pretty much just bleed you dry. Like, I'm not saying the studio and gym managers are evil. They're not, but like they will take advantage of you. And they did not, in my experience, my managers, short of one of them, did not have good boundaries. Like I remember there was like a massive snowstorm. You're making no money. They do not salt the hills in Seattle. Like they don't salt the roads in Seattle. It's a mess. And they were like, well, can't you come in? And I go, no, the amount of money that it's going to cost for me to like fix my wrecked car and possibly injure myself is not worth like the $23 an hour you want to pay me for the one idiot who has like a 4-wheel giant car that they shouldn't be driving to come in to lie on their back and do some feet and straps. But like, that is kind of the culture that I think so many of us are in. And I think there's something worth saying, like, it's really dysfunctional.
Yeah. I did not have a good management or like that way of taking care of your staff model to me at all, which is, I think, why I found myself in those situations where I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't know what was normal and what was, and you're right. It's, I think part of the situation with studios and gyms, I'm just going to not go too deep into it, is that most people who work for them are independent contractors. So the studio or the gym management has no idea what that individual is doing for the other, 38 hours of their work week, if they only work 2 classes a week there, or what it is. So there's no one overseeing the whole career or business or workload of the individual teacher. So the management is just trying to get whatever they can out of that person and whatever. I've been a studio owner. It just is what it is. But but there's I didn't have that model to me either. And that's one of the things I consider is that I've had conversations with friends who have corporate jobs, and they were like, oh no, I'm going through a tough time. And I just call my manager and she says, take the day off, go have a mental health day. And I was like, okay, well, I need to start treating myself like that. If I want this to be sustainable. That was my, linchpin, right? It's like, if I want this to be sustainable, then I have to put my mental health first. Or if I want this to be sustainable, I have to make sure that I'm rested. Otherwise, if I burn out, it's not sustainable at all. But yeah, man, I didn't have that modeled. I don't know. The only thing I know is to take time off, but I'm sure a great manager can do a lot for us as business owners as well.
Yeah. I mean, it really does kind of go back in this really bizarre way to self-parenting. It's the same, it's the same boundaries as not drinking caffeine after 12 or drinking water throughout the day. Some of this stuff is it's so basic, and yet it's so easy to just get stuck in this whirlwind, especially again, if you're alone and you don't have people to be like, hey, this isn't great. I'm married now. I do have someone who occasionally is like, hi, can we just okay, let's just step away from this. And it's gotten much better, but it's there's no blueprint for this. And I think that that's what makes it so hard, is there's no blueprint. You're alone. All that you see is everyone else's highlight reel on freaking Instagram, right? You don't know what's happening in their life. And also you don't know what their income streams look like. You don't know anything. All you know is what you see on Instagram, which is never reality. And yet our brains just end up falling right into that. And I think that we just feel compelled to compare ourselves to what someone else is doing. And the truth is we only know what we see from the outside. We don't know how much money they have. We don't know how much support they have. We don't know how much money their business actually brings in. There's so many factors that go into it. And I think that almost fuels the panic to keep going. You ever sort of notice that?
Oh, gee whiz. Yeah. And I just don't, I'm stammering because yes. And I don't go on Instagram really at all anymore. I have made the executive decision to make my content off Instagram, which I've always done, and then have someone else in my DMs and in managing my comments. I cannot say if that is I've only done it for 2 months, overall is the best business strategy, because I do think that if the business owner can be responding to their own comments and responding to their own DMs and being there, I think that is the ideal situation in terms of creating community. However, Instagram is just not great for me and my business in terms of my mental state, my productivity, getting distracted, not, just the addictive quality of being on there. So yeah, man, that happens to me all the time. I try not to look at what anyone else in my space is doing. And the way that you echoed, what you see on Instagram is not reality, is something really important for people to consider. For example, I started putting my videos in my newsletter last year just to try it out, see how that would go. So I had a video newsletter, and multiple people saw me do that and started to do the same thing. And I'm cool with that. See an idea you want to do and do it. However, it didn't work the way I wanted it to. So I'm changing my strategy. So just because you see someone doing something, i.e. me putting my videos in my newsletter, doesn't mean it's working for them or doesn't mean it's having a good effect or the effect that you want it to have. Like just because someone's doing something doesn't necessarily mean it's successful. So I would be mindful of like looking at what everyone else is doing. Just like you said, you don't know how much money they're bringing in from that. You don't know how many ads they ran to that thing. So then they're actually not making any money from the thing, even though they're selling out or whatever it is. You don't know that kind of information. So it's really dangerous to base your strategies just on what you see other people doing from the outside.
Yeah. I mean, I could not more wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think that that's what's so interesting is like something that I wish people understood behind the scenes. And when I say it, like they actually believed me, because sometimes I don't think they believe me, right? Is they like one of the things I've been asked a lot, like one of the greatest ironies of my life is my YouTube channel. Like I did really good SEO on my YouTube channel back in like 2014, 2015, Amazing. When I had like no idea what I was doing. And I have this one viral video on there that's like 3 best hip flexor stretches for tight hip flexors. Like the title is nonsensical, but it's #1 on Google and it has like 1 million views. And that one video plus a handful of other really dumb ones makes me like $180 a month in ads on YouTube. That's amazing. And I have over 10,000 subscribers. And it's never really, I mean, sometimes those people find me on Instagram and eventually they end up on my list. But like, if you were to ask me what I did to have like a viral video on YouTube or an income stream on YouTube or 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, I bought an online course in 2014. I followed it really closely for 3 months. I uploaded a video every week without any clue what I was doing for 1 year. And then I completely abandoned it for 3 years. And then I opened it one day and went, I have a lot of subscribers. What happened? Like there's nothing optimized. It's completely accidental. I couldn't recreate it if I tried. And that's what I think people need to realize is that most of this stuff is an experiment and a lot of it is successful, but you won't ever see the success, right? When I posted that hip flexor video, I didn't know that hip flexor video was going to be like a smashing hit. Like it's the first video I ever filmed. Like 5 years later, that hip flexor video was successful. And it's not even about what I do. I don't even teach stretches. So I just think people need to realize that so much of this is just one big experiment, but it's actually much like exercise and movement and everything else. It's more like, do you consistently show up and put attention and energy into a thing in your business? Because eventually you will usually see like this snowball effect, but you won't see it for like a year.
No, so that's my new motto. It's a practice because you have to do it consistently over time and know that there are long-term results. And this is like, I don't know how to put it into words yet, but it's like the bee in my bonnet at the moment, which is everyone that I talk to, all these yoga teachers I talk to, I love you yoga teachers. You're amazing, but they want a sustainable business. This is what they tell me. They want it to be sustainable, blah, blah, blah. I get that. Largely stems out of like teaching 20 classes a week for a studio and realizing they can't do that forever. So they want it to be sustainable, but they want it to be sustainable yesterday. And what I have just found, like what you have, is that it's the slow burn. It's not an overnight success. It's not learning one strategy or one technique. It's not taking one course or doing one particular thing. It's the culmination of little things consistently done over time that yield results. And I was interviewed on someone else's podcast about like content strategy. Like, do you plan your stuff or do you just come up with it when you're inspired? And I said, oh God, if I just posted when I was inspired, I'd post once a month or something like that. I post consistently because half the time I never know what is the thing that's going to go viral. Just like you said with the hip flexor thing, like you didn't know that that was the thing. And for me, I don't know necessarily which podcast is going to get the most downloads or whatever it is, but it just so happens that it strikes a chord. But if I wasn't showing up consistently over that long stretch of time, I wouldn't have hit on that podcast that was super successful, or that, you know, you might not have made that video that was like ended up being the viral one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's kind of interesting about this is what I notice is, again, I say this with love, people want to skip the learning curve, right? They don't want to be beginners. And so they're like, how do I get good at writing sales emails? And I'm like, you write sales emails. They're like, it's really
a lot of bad
hard.
ones.
Yeah, you write a lot of shitty sales emails. And they're like, but it's going to take me like 20 hours. And I'm like, I know it used to take me a week to write a single sales email. And now like I can write them in my sleep. But the reason why I can do that is because I've done it so many times. It's like, it wasn't intuitive, like so many things. Like the way that these things become intuitive is you do them. And I think a lot of the things in business that can help keep our sanity, right? I think sometimes we want everything we create to be like brilliant and exciting and whatever. Like we want to be inspired by our own content. But I have to say my most inspirational content to other people, and again, I don't want to sound dismissive because everyone listening, most of you engage with my content, right? It's like teeny tiny exercise. Like I know what's going to do well. I know that like teeny tiny exercises with the word core will always do well. And I have to tell you, everyone who's listening, I say this with love. I am so bored by these teeny tiny core progressions because it's all I've been teaching since I was 19 years old and I'm 36. I'm very old now. And but I know that people, when I post it on Instagram, will find it helpful. And it used to almost bother me, right? Where I was like, there's so many more interesting things in the world. And then I was like, they like it. They find it helpful. It's new to them and it's easy for you. Why are you fighting this, Nikki? This is not like, there's a part of me that almost wants to make my life hard and try to be creative. And it's actually like the knowledge I have is actually enough to be helpful right now. I don't have to overthink it.
Yeah. And the piece about repetition, right? It's like thinking that you always need to say something new or exciting or cutting edge or whatever, when oftentimes when you find something that works, just finding new ways to talk about the same thing, like a new post about those 3 exercises with different movements or different things or whatever, it's what people are there for often, right? So it's like do more of the same with that. And but that's a tricky thing you sort of have opened up there. And I have been thinking about it, but I have never put words to it. It's like, what are we doing when we create this business or content or whatever it is? Are we creating it for personal fulfillment? Or are we creating it to be of service in business? Because if we're creating it to be of service in business, you'd create the 3 tiny core things because that's what people want. That's what they're there for. You're serving people. You're helping people in that way. When it's personally fulfilling to you, sure, we can create that content. But oftentimes I see business owners be really resistant to the other stuff, like what you were saying. And I have been as well. Like not to let the cat out of the bag, but my Instagram is also boring to me. Like how you were saying, I'm so bored of your 3 core exercises. I don't find my content is not what I listen to. I don't look for other content like mine to consume. It's not interesting to me. I'm not interested particularly in what I post, but my people are interested in what I post. Right. So it's a funny thing. Like, where is that balance?
And I do think you have to strike a balance, right? Because like, I know for me, I've struck the balance in a few ways. One of the things is my podcast, if I were smart about it in business, my podcast would have a niche. I would double down on the niche. Everything would be in a lot. Nope. My podcast is the place that I just get to have whatever conversation I want, however I want to have it. And it's not, I'm not like the podcast is related to business. I really like it. I'm excited about it, but it's also like my creative endeavor where like, I don't care if this thing ever makes me a dime. That's not why I'm doing this. That's one of the things. And also my Instagram, I kind of straddle the same line where I go, okay, I'm going to make sure I put in content that I know will do well. That's easy for me to batch and do ahead of time. But I also give myself permission to just have these expositions on whatever feels top of mind when I feel like posting it. And it's actually been a really nice balance because I don't feel like my brand is hollow and void of me and my personality, but it also ensures that it's not just completely off the beaten path all the time, which it would be if I didn't ever plan anything.
Yeah. Well, I think people also want to know they're doing business with a human, right? So having that part where you do show your personality and like share what is more interesting to you, I think is important, but it can't be the only thing you do if you also want to have a business that makes sense, right? That it's like easy to have like a niche and attract the right people. But yeah, it's a funny thing. I don't know, because I like to create stuff for personal expression too. So I'm just trying to figure that out in my own world. It's like, where does that fit? And like the topics that I'm interested in aren't necessarily the same topics that my people are interested in. So, but it's a curious thing. But that can also be like when I'm thinking about like burnout and stress and like all of the things. I'm always trying to think about how to make it the most streamlined. Because I don't know about you, but like I spend a shit ton of time on the podcast. So I'm like, I need it to work for me. But then, I don't know. So it's like, I guess picking and choosing where you, like what you said, like your podcast is your area of personal fulfillment where you get to have it related, but also it's inspiring to you.
Yeah, it is. But something I've gotten better about is I'm like, but I will put in promos about what I am selling at the beginning and end. Right. Like I've started making myself do that. So it's like, it's this self-parenting thing where I'm like, it's fine. It's fine, Nikki. You can have a podcast that's about dick all, whatever you want, that makes absolutely no sense week to week with zero themes and no through line other than you personally wanted to have that conversation. Yeah. But you must put in a promo at the beginning or end of it to promote your business.
Yes.
And that's it's enough, right? I'm like, it's at least smart marketing. And
yes.
And I guess that's just kind of it, right? It's like, just understand what you're doing. And I think have reasonable expectations for what you're getting out of it. Because the other thing is my podcast is also a networking tool. And I can't necessarily take it and be like, there's my ROI in business, but it has allowed me to meet a lot of people and collaborate with other people to get in front of new audiences. And so again, I think you just need to be realistic about where you're putting your energy and does it actually make sense for A, enjoyment factor, or B, does it give you something that you need, or does it give your people something that they need?
Yeah, that's so smart. Also, you remember how I don't know if we recorded that bit, but the bit where we were talking about Joe Rogan at the beginning, being like, how crazy is it that
let's go there. We were not recording yet. So, right. So that was the backstory is we started with talking about Joe Rogan and then I was like, let's hit record. So I'll let you take it from here. But yeah.
Well, I just had it was a funny little thing. So, spoiler alert, everyone's going to hate me and unfollow me on Instagram after this, but I just have to say it. I watch Joe Rogan's podcast regularly. Like I don't watch every episode, but I will consume his podcast regularly. So, do what you want to do. Hate me, call me names. It's already happened when I tell my friends, they're like, fuck you, click. So, but anyway, but the funny thing is what you just said is his podcast strategy. So his podcast strategy is to have whatever conversation he wants to have that is interesting and inspiring to him. And that's the only theme of his podcast. He has no theme other than he genuinely wanted to have that conversation with that person. And then he sells ads, like not for his stuff, but like there's ad space because he gets so many downloads. There's ad space that, there's whatever, 5 or 6 ads in his podcast. Who knows what he makes? I know he's got an amazing deal with Spotify and all of those sorts of things. So he's making money out of it, but it doesn't have a theme. Like one week it can be about hunting. And then the next week it's about martial arts. And then the next week it's about religion or I don't know, whatever. Like there's no through line other than he was interested in that topic.
Well, I think something that you're bringing up here, there's a few really interesting things about the Joe Rogan phenomenon, right? One of them is that your business can be, and this is terrifying, helpful, and also creates so much decision fatigue, truly can be whatever you want it to be, as long as you have something that gets a group of people who are sort of like-minded into whatever it is that you're doing, you can ultimately turn it into an income stream in some way, shape, or form if you understand the basic underlying foundations of marketing. The other thing that's so interesting about Joe Rogan is that you can be, I'm trying to come up with the nice words. You can be very irresponsible with information on the internet. I'll just say that. And if your marketing is good, you can be wildly successful, even if everything that you're saying really should make you be a member of the tinfoil hat club.
Well, he's into conspiracy theories, but like he's open about it, right? So I think that there's, it's such an interesting phenomenon, and it's a cool business model to have, like what you were saying, to have your podcast be the business. And like for me, my podcast isn't my business. It's a marketing tool for my business, right? One day I will have a podcast that is my business, but right now it's not. Like the podcast is not monetized in any way, but I do what you do and like do promos for my stuff at the beginning or like in the middle or whenever, but I don't sell ads. I mean, no one would give me ads anyway. I don't get enough downloads to do that. But like, I mean, that's not where I'm headed with the intention of the podcast. But as you said, if you wanted your business model to be that, you could have the podcast be the business model, but you would just have to figure out a way that you would appeal to the masses, right? Because you would need a lot of downloads to be able to do that, unless you had a Patreon.
Yeah. And I think I was even thinking about it more as like, I think of like the podcast is like actually even not like for Joe Rogan, it is the entire business in some ways, but like for us, even like it's almost like the marketing strategy, because there's different types of personalities that like different marketing strategies lend themselves well to. And your marketing strategy should be based around your strengths. And some people are going to be attracted to someone because they're like a little robotic Wikipedia. And again, I don't mean this in an insulting way, right? They're the type of person who can do everything where it's like 5 great every day on Instagram, 5 great exercises for X. And it's like every day kind of looks the same. The outfits kind of look the same. And they're so consistent that everyone goes to them for that one thing. And then some of us, like myself, are a little chaotic and creative. And half of why people follow me is because I'm apparently like reality TV. I'm entertaining and my content is fine, but I'm pretty sure half of it is that they're like, oh, what wild thing is she going to say? And that's a little bit of the Joe Rogan model. Sadly, not that I want to put myself in the Joe Rogan rowboat, because that's terrifying.
You actually, all your strategies are the Joe Rogan strategies. Like the content is completely different, right? The content is completely different. So we'll just say that. But the strategy, I guess he's a personality. It's like the personality is part of what draws people in, I guess, right?
Yeah. And I think it's a really interesting, and sometimes I don't think it's the only business strategy, but I think what's important for people to know is that even I have boundaries around where and how I let myself show my personality. Like on Instagram, as of yesterday now, like on TikTok, you can reply where it shows people's comments and you can make a new Instagram reel replying to their
saw that.
Yeah, replying to their stupid content. I call it rage content because like someone says something unbelievably dumb in your comment section and then you can post it and then you can like go off on them. And I have made a pact with myself, something that I am not allowed to do is rage content on Instagram. I'm not allowed to reactively reply because it's very entertaining and it's terrible for my mental health. And I always I would always feel bad about it afterwards if I were to do it. So I don't do that. I'm not allowed. If someone's content makes me want to rage react, I just delete the comment.
Yeah.
That's my boundary. And it's with myself.
Sometimes I just say, thanks for sharing your perspective.
Oh, I'm not capable of being that nice. I'm not. I won't.
Good. Because it's like, having boundaries with that is also important, right? Like if we're wrapping up that whole sort of package about having boundaries with yourself within business, because no one else is giving you those boundaries as a business owner, whether it's for rest or for how you actually schedule your time off. It's the same thing with, what you feel comfortable sharing. with the world when you do show your personality as part of your brand, which most of us have to do, right? Like I don't think you really get that far if you are just as you said, like a hollow sort of representation of something. But there's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be on the internet.
Yeah. And I mean, I think what's kind of interesting is it's like, to me, sometimes what's been one of my biggest challenges in content creation is I have an idea and I go, oh, this applies to business. And I go, oh, this applies to exercise. Like it's like this overarching theme of life. And I think so much of like having boundaries and not making yourself nuts in your own business is understanding yourself. And it's understanding like your strengths and also like your triggers and your weaknesses. And like, I know
100%.
I know that I am like a hair trigger reactive person. And again, it can get a lot of attention, but it's just not good for me. At the end of the day, I'm better off with 3 core exercises than I am replying to someone's comment, whether or not my reply would be thoughtful. And that's why like, I just don't let myself do it. But I think that we all have to kind of figure out that stuff for ourselves. And if we're doing something and it feels really icky, we don't have to do it.
Well, svadhyaya, right? It's yoga, like know thyself, study thyself. It's something that's so important. And I think that without for me personally, because I've had a lot of inner challenges with mental health, that if I hadn't and I've got like a psych degree and then 10 years of teaching and 15 years of practicing yoga, if I didn't have all that and I didn't know my weaknesses, my business would be a dumpster fire, right? Like, I know that I'm quite sensitive. Hence, I'm not in my comments in my DMs anymore. And I don't, the person who is, doesn't tell me about negative ones unless they need to be actioned. And I just don't read them, and because I'm pretty sensitive. And had I not known that, and I would like to be less sensitive, I smoked a pot for a long time and that made me a lot less sensitive because I don't particularly like that. But unless I'm doing that, I'm sensitive, right? So knowing yourself, like if you could do nothing else for your business, it would be like know your strengths and know your weaknesses. And I always call it like bolstering your weaknesses, like put supports around your weaknesses because we all have them. And for the most part, like I find it's usually better to accept them than to try and change them, unless it's something that you can change easily. Then by all means, but just put supports around it so that your weaknesses don't make your business into the dumpster fire that it could be.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think ultimately it comes back to like, forget the business, screw the business. It ultimately life is too short, right? Like I think ultimately the heart of all of this is it comes back to self-preservation, because if you were really doing this for money, if you and I were really doing things for money, we would not be running our own businesses in the yoga or movement or fitness field, because this is a terrible place to try to make money.
Totally. Yeah. Like it's not where you'd go for that.
Right. Like I actually really am doing the things I want to be doing. I love the things that I do. I love helping people. I love teaching. I love talking about this stuff. But like at some point you do have to kind of protect yourself with the understanding of you have to be practical enough that unless you're just like wildly wealthy, which is not most of us, right? You have to be practical enough that it can make sense on paper.
Yeah.
But you also have to have an element of self-preservation, or else it's not, to your point, it's not sustainable. And I guess to my point, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. This was fun.
This was very fun. So we're kind of nearing that stopping point. So with that, is there anything we didn't cover that you kind of just think people should know or wish people would know? And then I'll just give you a chance to plug your podcast and let people know how they can get in touch with you and work with you and all those things.
The only thing that I want to leave folks with is that little thing that I said about having a bee in my bonnet, that if you want your business to be sustainable, then stop looking for a quick fix, right? Those two things don't go together. Just like if you wanted to get stronger or, develop your yoga practice, you can't flip a switch and, like you said, skip the learning curve and just get from point A to point B. We need to, something that you said, be realistic with what our expectations are, so that you can then schedule in your downtime and your rest, knowing that having your eye on the prize of the long-term sustainability of what you're doing, rather than just being like, I can rest later, or pushing through that to get to the next goal without having that long-term mindset around this is going to take time and that's okay. And if I have to clear things off my plate or say no to a few things so that I can rest, knowing that there's a long-term plan, then, that's the one thing I would like to leave people with. Yeah.
Yeah. I think rest should be part of the plan. Without it,
has to be.
There's no way around it. And I think that's the reality. Believe me, if I'd found that hack, I would be sharing. I'd be doing it by now. That's the one.
I think it's called cocaine, but that's not really what I'm into at the moment. I do drink caffeine, but that's as far as I go with that.
I don't know if that's hard enough. All right. Awesome. Well, for people who want to get in touch with you, work with you, find you on, Instagram, listen to your podcast, where are the best places?
Yes. The best thing to do is just to know my name, which is Cora Geroux, CoraGeroux. That's my website, corageroux.com. I'm Cora Geroux on Instagram. The podcast is called The Teaching Yoga Podcast, but it will be changing very soon. So the name of the podcast is changing. So if you just put my name in the podcast search, you'll find it in there. But yeah, everything's just my name. So as long as you can spell that, you're good.
All right. And I'll link it up in the show notes.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It was great.
And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't already done so, please consider leaving the show a rating and review over on iTunes. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Catch you on the next one.